for you. So today we have a great presentation for you. It's the CHARM, Participatory GIS platform for non-technical stakeholders. It is a very interactive SimCity style tabletop mapping platform that provides hyper-localized planning and mitigation support. We're very fortunate today to have Stephen Miklinchek as the Planning Program Director and CHARM, which CHARM stands for Community Health and Resource Management, lead at the Texas Community and Watershed Partners. It's a community planning program of Texas A&M Agrilife Extension Service. So we're very pleased to have Stephen here today, and I think it's going to be a great presentation. By all means, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we will have a Q&A at the end. So Stephen, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over here, and again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Brian. How's my audio?
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction and everyone's time here today. I look forward to sharing about the work that we do. I did ask Brian leading up to this if, with the audience that we have here, if this message would resonate, because I think what we do is a little bit different, perhaps a lot of bit different than what others in GIS are doing. Not to say that you're not aware of these practices, but we definitely make our paychecks from doing these practices and have built a program over the years to bring participatory GIS to communities around the state here in Texas, and with the goal of certainly of educating our communities and supporting the planning and mitigation that happens at the local level. So I am a planner by training, AICP. I do have a very strong background in GIS, which I enjoy the technical side of mapping and cartography. But I also enjoy the people side of things, which is bringing them together and working through challenges and difficulties. And of course, with the planning process involves a lot of different perspectives. So what I want to share today is that kind of work that our community does. And it's going to involve some of the softer skills and approaches that might be, like I said, not as familiar with those of us who work with the technical side of things in GIS. So I'm here to talk about a couple of our core technologies with our program, and it's our work with public engagement. And then Brian also asked that we spend a little bit of time at the tail end talking about the work that we're doing for the state of Texas with Harvey recovery dollars and the Texas General Land Office. So first, it's sort of important to understand where we're at within the university. So we are not researchers and we are not instructors. We are practitioners. So we work with GIS to support projects. We do planning to support communities. A&M system is a sprawling, huge system. It has multiple agencies housed within it, including Texas Division for Emergency Management, which is the state's emergency management response agency. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension and Extension Service. We have a presence in all 254 counties in the state. This one agency alone has about 1,500 staff and personnel. Underneath AgriLife Extension, and you may be familiar, most people's exposure to the Extension Service and cooperative extension in their states might be the 4-H program with the youth education program, Master Naturalist programs, and Master Gardener programs.
You get 2 last month, Ryan?
Excuse me? So, so the mission with AgriLife Extension is we're not here to tell people what to do. What we do is we provide data and tools. We're a non-regulatory entity, so we're definitely not Big Brother. We're here to work with communities and support the work that they do. So within that, and its large focus on agriculture, we actually have a highly specialized unit that looks at both urban planning, green infrastructure, and disaster preparedness. So after Hurricane Harvey, the state legislature supported funding for DAR, which is Disaster Assessment and Recovery, which is a new unit that we stood up here at A&M. And the TCWP, Texas Community Watershed Partners, is our teeny tiny program. Down at the very bottom there, we're at about 16 staff. We do the planning work and the green infrastructure work. So we're housed within, like I mentioned, the Disaster Assistance and Recovery Unit. We're about 55 staff. The TCWP unit, which focuses on planning and green infrastructure, is about the left third of the line there. And you'll notice our co-director there in the magenta shirt. So, so that's our unit of geospatial analysts and urban planners and green infrastructure professionals. So I think it's really important. You'll see that our mission definitely guides the programming that we do and how we engage our work. So when we look at computer mapping, especially GIS and supportive planning, there's such a strong emphasis on the data and the analysis and how do we visualize that analysis and how does that inform decision making. Those of us who work in planning and who engage the public realize that the answers aren't exactly straightforward. And that we need both halves of this equation together. We need the dialogue half together there at the table with the data half. And so those of us who work in GIS, we make it our specialty to understand what the data means, where it comes from, how far it can be stretched, and in what ways it can be used. And of course, our participants are there bringing their priorities and their respective agendas and mandates and issues that they have to work with. And between dialogue and data, I really consider them equal, because if we do a planning process without either of them, the process is probably going to go a little sideways or a lot sideways. And so what I like to say is dialogue is sort of first among equals. We need both of them there, data and dialogue. But my work is focused mostly on the dialogue side of things, even though I fully understand what we do here on the GIS side. So I'm going to talk first about how we engage our communities. So this is a picture from a typical workshop. We're looking at an interactive do-it-yourself tabletop. The image I don't have here, but you can maybe see in the background, is that there is a projector on a tripod behind the lady's shoulder there. So you can imagine that exact same configuration projecting that map down on the table. And the way we interact with the interface is with the wireless mouse that the gentleman is using there. We will run these workshops for communities. We will do very targeted outreach, engaging very specific stakeholders and bring them together for almost a day-long training. We'll do multiple tables in a workshop. So each table might consist of 5, 7, 8, 10 individuals, including a facilitator to help navigate the maps. And then each tabletop team will be working through the various charm exercises that we've prepared for them. So technically, we should cover this. What is the charm platform? So it's a combination of ESRI ArcGIS and CommunityViz, which is a third-party plugin. The We table, which is what we call that interactive tabletop interface, and then it's how we organize the data. So that's our charm data. Sometimes I call it the charm data armature. It is our highly standardized format for organizing data so that GIS and CommunityViz can use it pretty quickly. And so what participants are doing here is interacting with the map interface. They're turning layers on and off, and we guide them through different interactive exercises. These are non-technical participants. They do not have a GIS background, but they're able to play with different assumptions within a land use model, within a risk assessment, and they can see in real-time indicators and feedback about the kind of changes that they're making in a community. So we bring that together for a nicely structured educational exercise and training for our local elected officials, departmental staff, and departmental leadership, as well as stakeholders from around the community. This has been the backbone of our program. So we typically start out with a charm workshop. The counties that we pick have updated FEMA maps, and that is why we prioritize them. Since we have multiple tables, probably representing multiple communities at a workshop, it's often the case that a particular community will want additional assistance. So that would feed into what we call a project identification exercise. It could be a discovery or a scoping exercise, but they want a little more one-on-one effort to kind of look through the mapping and the data and the conversation, and we help point them in the right direction about the planning activities that they could be undertaking. That would then feed into a third step, ideally, for direct technical assistance. So we've supported quite a few communities with updating their zoning ordinances, their comp plans, infrastructure maintenance and design standards, and site design standards. What's common to all the work that we do across 1, 2, and 3 here is that there is some kind of mitigation component to the work that we do. So when we work with comp plans and zoning, we make sure that we work with the community so that they understand the value of higher standards. And we go through that conversation by looking at the charm model and the charm data, and so that they can see the feedback and the indicators about what these changes in their ordinances might look like for that community. Of course, that's going to tie into all sorts of factors that the community cares about, for example, enforcement, the capacity to run enforcement, who's going to do it, how are we going to fund it, and of course, is there the political appetite to increase higher standards? And of course, we want to be able to show the data that risk mitigation should pay for itself. So the CHARM approach, we've always envisioned as this, dialogue for supporting the analytical needs and human dimensions of cross-collaborative planning. So, so the key word here for me is cross-collaboration. So oftentimes participants, we think of collaboration, we're working with someone else on a team. We think of it as a synonym for professional teamwork. That's definitely true. Cross collaboration for me has an additional meaning where we're working with other teams outside of our team, people we don't normally work with, but we had to find some kind of agreement in terms of planning and mitigation. So that means bringing together, for example, Public Works Department, Planning Department, city leadership, emergency management, as well as other entities that have a shared stake and the priorities and how those priorities are set for a community. And of course, when you do that, you're bringing together different sort of political cultures and different mandates, as well as different capacities and different budgets. So obviously this points to a planning process that can kind of get complicated pretty quickly. And so what we have found is that the interactive mapping exercises provides a nice anchor point to ground these different conversations as we think about planning in reality. And not only are we not telling them what to do, they can kind of explore the data on their own. We're there to support them, to facilitate the exercises and to help them interpret the data that they're looking at. So what I'm going to run through here are a set of images from our workshops over the years. This is a very typical setup. You can see the projector and the tripod there on the left. Our facilitator is leading this conversation. This is an opening few moments. So people are watching the map. Again, these are not GIS professionals. They may not be even working with computer mapping or online mapping at all. So this might be their first exposure. I know at this table, we have senior elected leadership from a county. We have Public Works, we have planning, we have the Chamber of Commerce, as well as some other staff. And what we find is that a lot of times it's the first time that these individuals are kind of around the same table, having the same conversation about these issues that the community is facing together. We run through about 20 or 30 minutes of what I call that orientation. They're exploring the map layers. They're looking for their house. These maps are very specific to their communities. These exercises are specific to their communities. As you can see, as we get further, this is a different table, but as we get further into the exercises, folks are much more engaged. They're standing up. The dialogue, I think, is getting much more interesting. Folks are getting more comfortable in pointing out what they see in the map. And of course, this is an important part of the social side of what we do with CHARM, which is learning from each other and pointing out what we see in the GIS data and the analysis. As we go further into the exercises, the conversations obviously get very specific and even project specific, site specific.
I had a question that's off topic. Today, when I was in the parking garage, I saw a Freeze and Nichols backpack and someone had a water level logger with her.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
It's okay. Sorry, no problem. So what we see over time, and these workshops run for 3, 4, 5 hours, is that the participants are really engaged. I find that these workshops move pretty quickly, and that their engagement is pretty much continuous throughout the workshop. I really enjoy the one-on-ones that I see, and a lot of times us as facilitators, we're just helping to navigate the GIS. We're really letting the conversation being led by the local stakeholders who are working on the projects. And as they're learning about the data and as we communicate different mitigation and planning strategies, we actually hear people sort of change their thinking in real time, which is a good sign that one, education is working, and two, the data and the GIS is helping to contextualize how people think about their community. So I was at this table and I recall this very particular conversation. It's a rapidly growing community around Austin. And the local elected leadership was convinced that we needed to get more and more additional single-family homes, and that the floodways and the 100-year flood zone was an acceptable risk, according, to be able to add additional housing. And what we could show was that there was enough redevelopable land and open space that if you did even a marginal increase with your housing density, that you could actually accommodate the future population growth while retaining as open space the floodways and the flood zones within the city. And we're able to help show and communicate that story. And this is a nice moment where, you know, folks may, I would say, be sort of stubborn or think this is the way something has to be, but it's great that we can have a conversation around the table and use the data to help come up with solutions that build safer communities and keep people out of harm's way. What we do is each of these tables, as they work through the scenarios, we then throw it up on a big board, and we share this with the entire room. We ask for a volunteer from each table, not the facilitator, to share with the rest of the room the exercise and how it played out, what the scenario looks like, how they thought about development, what their priorities were. And this is another great moment to sort of share the different perspectives that each table worked through. And a key part too of sort of getting the buy-in from our participants is that when they're sharing these stories, they're using their own words. So it's not us as the planning experts or us as the facilitators communicating the story from each table. Each participant has sort of learned about the data, what it means, what the analysis means, and they're up there sharing the story. We give them about 3 or so minutes, maybe they take some questions, but this is really them sharing the story of their plan and their scenario from their table. And so what I wanted to show here and communicate is sort of this arc of participation where we start out with participants who might be a little bit reluctant, but what we see very quickly with the power of GIS and interactive analysis is that we really pull into the participants. They're involved in, I would say, nerdy data in a way they probably did not think they would be involved in when they woke up that morning. So we're very happy to be a part of that process. We're happy to be part of a process that helps them think deeper about the issues within their community, and certainly making connections among the different stakeholders within the community, because that really is where the answers lie. So the next section here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our technical program and what we do. So the first half, I'm talking about the social side of how we engage our participants. The second part here, talking about how we manage the GIS data. I will share now that what we do in GIS could take a multi-hour PowerPoint or presentation. It's just not going to happen today. So I'll do a very high level overview of how we approach this. Going to ad-lib this a little bit with some of the PowerPoints that we have, but I hope that gives folks here more of an insight into how we organize and structure our data and think about the data armature. So CHARM as a GIS application within ESRI and the projects that we build as a customizable, hyperlocal, interactive, data-driven analysis. So what we do is build different exercises over the years, and they are housed within a single project file. We have a template project file that allows us to import data from different communities when it's time to work in that community. And then the exercises are run on that template so that when the template is done running, we have finally a customized project application for that specific community. So here's just a sampling of some of the exercises that we have. All of these would be contained within a single project file. So we use this is our SimCity exercise, that feature land use exercise. We also look at higher development standards. We look at different mitigation opportunities. We can look at flood loss estimates, social vulnerability index, and of course, critical facilities exercises. There's some other exercises as well, but these are our major power players that we look at, and I'll show some screenshots about what we do. So if you're wondering how we run through these exercises in a workshop, it's helpful to share that we don't have a set schedule. So those images that you saw, we spent, like I said, about 20-30 minutes with orientation. At that point, us as facilitators, we're getting a read of the issues that the participants are interested in. A lot of times they will ask questions, well, what does that mean? Or what does this layer look like? And we'll turn it on and we'll go through the exercises. And an entry point into engaging with data is going to look different from one table than it is for another table. And so it's our job to kind of meet the participants where they're at, instead of sort of forcing them through a prescribed agenda. What we see is typically at the end of the day, each table still has gone through about the 4 or 5 different exercises. Each exercise can take anywhere from, as short as maybe about 10 minutes to we can spend over an hour on, for example, on the SimCity style exercise. But it makes it a fun and engaging day to look at community risk through all these different prisms. To develop an exercise, if a four-step process. Typically, we're engaging these communities several months in advance of a workshop. We're talking with key stakeholders. We're hearing from them what their priorities are, what the issues are, and what the local politics are like, and that helps us think through what exercises we run. We come back to the office and we work with our geospatial team, and we start thinking through, well, what data do we need to do this exercise? What indicators do we want to show? How do we want to visualize this? What charts do we need to create? And so we look at the data that we have at our current CHARM library, and we look at maybe what's missing. Perhaps the data is from the community, or we get it from another state, regional, or federal agency. The data that we have, there's no secret sauce to what we use. There's nothing that we hide behind the counter and then bring out for the workshop. All our data sets are publicly available and generally free. It allows us to do all these different exercises, and even just pulling the data sets together is its own form of value creation for these communities, and it creates a nice data library. Once we bring the data together and we put it in our grid data armature, we start thinking about what that script looks like and what the analysis looks like. And there's a lot of trial and error at this point. We go through multiple iterations. It could take anywhere from a few days to even a month or more, depending on the kind of exercise that we're looking at. We'll test it a few times in-house. We have a few things that we want to manage. Not only do we want to manage the attributes that we're creating and how quickly it runs, we also need to think about how does this exercise work for the participants. So if there's too many layers, or if the detail and the minutia is a little too much, that might be a turnoff for our participants. So we really want to think about what the goals are and what we're asking our participants to do. Once we build the script, we spin up our template, and then we roll it out at our workshop. So as I've mentioned, our county workshops will have anywhere from 2 to 4 communities, each with their own different models. And so each table is working with a data set and analysis that's specific to them. So thinking a little bit about our goals at a very high level, there is an object within each scenario. So is that object a population target? Is it the number of homes? Is it how much land we're protecting? And that's sort of a high order indicator that we're asking people to check. Are you exceeding that threshold? Do you have more room to go? And so as you're making changes to the map, you get to see these impacts. Are there other variables that the participants can play with? So if we're going to talk about infrastructure, then it could be about capacity. If we're going to talk about development or enforcement, it might be about budget. And then some of these indicators may not come from us. Some of the indicators may depend on the values that our participants give voice to. And so it's important for the table to also have a voice in some of the targets within the scenarios. So we include slider bars and drop-down menus so that they can test different levels of risk, time, and other thresholds and targets. So a few screenshots here of the kind of work that we do. So this is just north of Houston. Some screenshots. So this is in ArcGIS. I've kind of clipped it to clean it up a little bit, but you can imagine the toolbars at the top. We have our table of contents there, table of contents on the left. And what we're seeing here is CommunityViz as a third-party plugin into ArcGIS. So the charts here update in real time depending on the different assumptions that participants use. And that is a feature within CommunityViz that allows ArcGIS to run updates in real time. So this is a flood risk analysis, and what we're using here is FEMA flood risk data. We could use other sources as well. And what we do is we overlap this with different housing density at the local level that we have information for. So we get this both from parcel data and census information. And what we can see here is the impact on housing from these different levels of risk, 100-year and 500-year flood zone. We also built a social vulnerability exercise. If you're familiar with the concept, it is that specifically disasters impact different populations differently. Families and individuals with fewer means have fewer options in how they respond and recover to a disaster. There's a few indices that have been created out there, some from federal agencies, some from other universities. What we decided to do was take these different demographic characteristics and allow individuals to turn each characteristic on and off. And what CommunityViz is doing at that time as a participant turns on an indicator, you get a new blended average of what that social vulnerability score looks like. And I think it's a very interesting exercise because then the participants can kind of play with a sensitivity analysis. Well, how important is it that, we're talking about mobile housing or access to a vehicle or higher education or where English is a second language? And a lot of times this will correlate with their individual understanding of their own communities, of how they drive through the communities and the stakeholders and where they live, and sort of that mental model of the different neighborhoods within a community. And so when they see that reflected in the data, that creates a nice connection between the analysis and how the participants engage with the exercises. We can also look at flood loss estimates. So when we start overlapping BLE data with existing housing stock, we can start running some generalized calculations about number of homes that are impacted and at what flood depth. If we have an estimate of flood depth from our elevation, we can also start making estimates about dollar values in terms of impacts. And so in this particular case, we can estimate for the entire community at a 100-year flood zone about $41 million in losses, about 814 homes impacted with an average loss of about $50,000. Now, I know as analysts, we could nudge it this way, we could nudge it that way. If we use a different data set, we might get some different answers. The participants too can nudge these values in different directions. But the important piece here is that the participants are getting a sense of the scope of what a 100-year flood event would, what kind of impact that would have in their community. And to be able to see it play out in real time, especially as they add additional development to the map, is really important, and it really pulls in the participants. This is an exercise we call vacate. It's what we call part of our 3 mitigation power plays. So in the role of mitigation, they're expensive, but they provide high benefit in terms of benefit. So vacate means buyouts. Dedicate would be dedicated open space, and then elevate would be higher development standards. So vacate, dedicate, and elevate. So what we can show here is we have the interface on the upper left. The participants get to toggle different policies, and depending on those policies, the map will update, and they'll be able to see the number of homes that hit a particular threshold that they've decided upon. We can see the same thing with dedicated open space. Instead of housing, we can look at open space, and it might be better kept as undeveloped land. This is an exercise that we developed for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we came up with 5 values-based indicators. So the participants get to weigh each indicator according to the value that they assign to it. So we have high conservation lands, medium conservation lands. We have habitat cores, as well as wetlands that are estuarine and wetlands that are freshwater. And so as they move the slider bar left and right, assigning different values to these different characteristics, the green map on the right will update, showing where the highest value configuration is that the participants have developed. So this is just a sampling of the kind of exercises that we do. And the key part really is to get the conversation bubbling around the table. It isn't necessarily maximize the map or any particular risk reduction strategy. It is to get the parties talking together and thinking about strategies that they might have in common and that they can implement through planning and mitigation process. Last one here is our SimCity exercise, or what we call our future land use exercise. So you'll notice here in the image that they're looking at an extra sheet of paper with all the colors on here. And so what they're doing at this point is they're looking at the different development styles, which are represented by the different development colors. Planners will recognize these colors. And then the participants using the mouse there, you can see on the left, get to click on the squares and add the different development paints. And what GIS is doing at that point is running an overlap calculation. It knows if there's a wetland there, it knows the elevation of each square, it knows how many people that are already there, it knows it has access to, let's say, roads and infrastructure. And so then as you add development, the model is starting to fill in the nooks and crannies with the different development styles. And so this way communities can continue to test different scenarios, which is maybe they use, continue to build out the community as a set of low density suburban development, maybe a home every half acre or a home every quarter acre, or they could look at multi-story, multi-family, multi-use development and thinking about town centers, main streets, and different corridors. So they have a chance to look at different development options and think about the character of the community that we're making for the future. And a vision here, the timeline is a 1 to 2 decade timeline. So a lot of times our communities are given a target of, especially here in Texas, where many of our communities are growing rapidly, 40%, 50%, 100% growth over the next, 10 or so years. And thinking about what areas do we want to avoid in our community? Where is the risk in our community? And, for a lot of these stakeholders, they have family and children there. And so they want to make sure that their children and grandchildren have a community that they want to live in. So here's some examples from different communities around Texas. So here's a workshop in Denton. We can see the various paints on the map: green for conservation and greenways, commercial areas in red, residential and other types of development. So as you paint new development, particularly residential development, Charm's going to update the charts that you see on the left. So these will update in real time as paint is added to the map. And we can keep track of how many homes we're putting in a high-risk area as well as versus safe areas. So this can paint on either planned or ongoing projects, or it can be entirely hypothetical. A lot of communities like to play it very safe, and so we have a lot of participants who know the subdivisions that are coming in and the type of development. And it's reassuring that our numbers come very close to the housing numbers that they understand that these developments are attracting to their communities. The flip side is we don't tell a community how to plan. We discuss the very planning concepts, the benefits of this approach versus that approach, but we're not here to dictate what each community does. And so if a community does have the freedom to try something totally off the wall and completely hypothetical, and we encourage them to work through those ideas. There's also different challenges in these different communities. So here's New Braunfels. And so, we continue to tailor our exercises to the communities that we work in. When we work in CommunityViz, these charts and these indicators, we create them, we build them. They're fairly straightforward. There's wizards within CommunityViz to help build these. What we do is we create a preset arrangement, and then we create a snapshot like a bookmark. And so what that allows us to do is run through the different exercises with that prearranged configuration, so that the chart's always in the same spot. The map symbology is always the same. Once they save the results, we can go to a different exercise, and then we can come back and look at the previous results.
Nope, I just blew my nose and didn't know
It's
I
a
was
very nice
muted.
exercise. So that's an overview of what we do technically. You'll notice that it's pixelated. This is what we call our Charm grid. That grid is at a 2.5 acre scale. It allows us to aggregate upwards, and it also allows us to scale the work that we do to communities around the state. A bit of an overview: we have done well over 24 counties in Texas, probably over 100 communities, and I know we've engaged over 1,500 participants over the last 8 years. We've done these workshops in other states as well, so we're able to spin up on pretty short order workshops for, we worked in Michigan, Florida, New Jersey, Mississippi, Alabama, and I think we'll be working very soon in Louisiana. So it's nice to be able to take the lessons learned that we've had here in Texas and both how we build this as GIS and how we run this as a workshop to other states around the country. We have very strong working relationships with ASFPM. We also work with NOAA, Fish and Wildlife, and then we've worked with a variety of state and regional entities. So Mississippi, Alabama Sea Grant's been a great partner. We've worked with Texas Water Development Board, and we're certainly working now with the Texas General Land Office, which segues to the third and final part of our presentation today. So a lot of information here, so I'll try and keep it very high level and succinct. So Brian asked that I spend some time to discuss some of our GLO funded projects. As you may be aware, the Texas General Land Office is utilizing Harvey recovery dollars to invest in the development of state digital infrastructure to improve mitigation and planning in the state. So this is a massive effort. It involves 3 major consulting teams, including Freese and Nichols. It involves various state and federal partners to implement these efforts into a statewide resource that would be accessible to communities. The General Land Office, as part of this vision, is also working with Texas A&M Galveston and UT's Advanced Computing Center to host these data resources and to model these flood outputs that our various consulting teams have prepared. Agrilife's slice of this overall larger effort is to develop the community-facing tools so that Charm and CommunityViz serve as a analytical space that can retrieve data from these statewide resources and share that with communities. Meanwhile, communities can engage that resource and push information back towards statewide resources. We're very happy that this is at Agrilife. We feel that these community-facing components are definitely educational at their core as they help communities plan. So we get to continue our mission of providing data and tools. And there's two major components here. So there's a twofold strategy to how we're proceeding and what we've communicated with GLO. So one is to take CHARM, the way we use it now within ArcGIS, and develop an online, a web application outside of the ESRI ecosystem, a non-proprietary system that would be community-based. And we'll be putting prototypes for that in the coming years. The second piece of the strategy is 1 foot within ESRI world, because that is obviously the de facto professional space for GIS. And if we want to remain relevant for the support that we provide communities, we're going to need 1 foot there. And so that brings us to CommunityViz software as a third-party plugin. So in October, we completed the purchase of CommunityViz from City Explained, which is a consulting firm out of North Carolina. I'll talk a little bit more about the history of the software, but it is now a product of Texas A&M Agrilife, managed out of our unit. And we're very happy and pleased to have this on board and to continue the success of CommunityViz and nearly 20 years of history as a product. I think it's a very fascinating product, started in the late 1990s as a vision from the Orton Family Foundation that wanted to support a product that would allow communities to be more involved in the planning process. The not-for-profit developed the initial prototypes for about 3 years. Around 2004, it was spun out as a commercial application to a company called Placeways. You may be familiar with that. That was led by Doug Walker. They continued to enhance and build the product over the years. In 2011, CommunityViz was named as ESRI's Desktop Extension of the Year. And they continued to add new features related to HASIS and other wizards that are built into the application. In 2016, the product was sold to City Explained, led by Matt Noonkester, and they continued the software's development, including the development of CommunityViz Pro. So the current version works with ArcGIS Desktop, and of course we know that is migrating to the Pro version, and that means the plugin needs to be updated to fit that as well. This year, the software is purchased by Agrilife in our unit, and we look forward to releasing the full version of CommunityViz Pro in the coming year. I have a couple of quotes here. I really enjoy both quotes because at the core of what CommunityViz is about is evolving the community. The original vision here for CommunityViz out of Vermont, I can just vision this as a couple of gentlemen on a porch of a shop in Vermont, both envisioning software tool that would make the planning process more accessible to ordinary citizens. And that's, I think, what we do here as a program. And so we're happy to continue that tradition and continue that mission. Another quote that I believe is from the award in 2011 is from Jack Dangerman, president of ESRI, basically saying, hey, this community is this application that opens up the planning process to more people. And that's certainly something that we subscribe to. And I love the last line here. Of course, at the same time, it takes a lot of the guesswork, speculation, and pure subjectivity out of the planning equation, which is, I think, another way of saying that we're helping to anchor the conversations that we have at the local level. The product's been around for about 20 years. This is our map of licensing over that time. So we're very excited to be custodians for the software and to continue its development. One of the new features that we're working on with CommunityViz is an area of work that I think has been neglected in terms of interactive exercises, especially with respect to green infrastructure. So we piloted a minimum viable product here for the city of Kingsville. And what we do is we look at flow path analysis through neighborhoods. We use machine learning to come up with ground cover and building footprints. And instead of development paints, we get to use green infrastructure paints. And so participants can place different green infrastructure practices on a map within these different neighborhoods, and they will intercept the various stormwater flows. And so we can start seeing where it makes sense to add different practices. And if we have cost and benefit information for each of these practices, we can start painting a better picture. And so again, providing access to the planning process to our non-technical stakeholders and our decision makers who a lot of times really just want to be a part of the process. I'm going to shift gears here. I only have one slide and I'm on the second to last slide. It's Charm Online, so our web application. We envision this as a SaaS application that would be spun up for each community and hosted by Texas A&M. We're still holding on to that open framework approach. So everything that we do now, all the data sets and the equations that we have are fully open. It is not in a black box. Any of the users could come in behind us and modify the equations that we use. So we think that's really important. The real-time cloud platform is also really important so that we need multiple users engaging it at the same time. And some of our goals here is to definitely have a dead simple full frame interface. And obviously the most difficult challenge is designing that intuitive navigation of the data and the exercises, but that is a very high priority for our team and puts a very high emphasis on UI UX. So here's a technology stack that we're looking at based on Java and PostGIS. So some of the other tools that we need. It behooves me to say that we are recruiting in January of this year, right after holidays. So for our product team, we're hiring for 4 positions, including a product manager and CommunityViz software developer, as well as several senior positions to support the product team. We also have 2 positions open for our planning team. So know that we're located in Clear Lake, Houston, and that we'll be posting these positions on our website, communitycharm.org. So hopefully if you're interested, you will apply. And if you know people who might be interested or this might appeal to, keep us in mind and feel free to forward the links in the future after Christmas. So you can reach me. Here's my email. And I'm happy to take any questions. I think we have about 15 minutes. How am I doing on time?
Oh, you're doing good. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. That was a wonderful presentation. Before I jump into the questions, if anybody does have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat box and we'll go ahead and get them read off. We'll start with 2 from M. Hebert. So his first question is, or her first question is, looks like CV runs on ArcMap. Is there support for AGP?
Yeah, we're going to work on ArcGIS Pro. So we have the beta version out, which is not publicly released, has been shared with a few trusted users. We're hoping for a rollout in 2023.
Okay, great. And from the same individual, can you share any documented workflows you practice, especially around the green sustainable initiatives? That sounds very useful here in South Florida.
Oh, no, quick answer is no. We would love to share that. We're very early in the process and there's a lot of trial and error here. So we're working through the different ideas, but this is something we definitely want to be able to share. Ideally, we would love to create a community around these kind of practices because we've seen others use it and come up with different approaches that we wouldn't have thought of. So.
All right. Again, if you have any
more
questions
going in there.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead and post them. Let me ask you, Stephen, and this is Brian. Is there a certain type of computer platform that you need to operate this? Do you need a robust system? Do you need, is this better that you have a lot of data covering maybe, bigger portions of counties and watersheds? I mean, does it need to be pushed to some sort of, enterprise SDE?
No, I don't think it needs to be on enterprise, but
Okay.
Computing resources is definitely a consideration. So we can try and keep our laptops updated and make sure they have the processing power. The data packages that we use on the tabletops, we're not connected to the internet. We don't want to rely on the internet on a workshop. So we house it all there locally. We're looking at several gigabytes of data, especially when you start including some of the underlying rasters. So there's a lot of features in there. We probably have, I think, over 36 layers. A lot of them are the same layers, just showing different attributes within the same layers. So there's a lot of information that the machine is processing in real time.
Okay, very nice. I don't know if we have any additional questions in here. You did a really good job of covering the overview, but we really appreciate it. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand here, and then but we'll get them off. Or if you think of something after, you can let us know and send us to the info@usatexas.org, and we'll be happy to get that off to Stephen. So,
Hey, Stephen, I do have a quick kind of a half comment, half question, but I mean, is it pretty common to see sort of an aha moment when you introduce this different perspective to people in terms of, everybody sort of has a mental map of their community, right? But when you kind of flip it on its head here and show them this top-down view and how the lay of the land really is, is there a lot of aha moments in terms of people's understanding of, of their community?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what we live for, because it makes a good day. It makes a great conversation. You feel more satisfied, kind of hitting home after that. Sometimes it can be bad news too. And so, I recall a community close to Houston where we have the P&Z, Planning and Zoning Commissioner there. Wanting to serve his community, elected into office or appointed, no background, but wanting to do the right thing, and didn't realize that about 90% of that community was in a 100-year, 500-year flood zone. Mm-hmm. Which lines up with the experience, but be able to help see those lines on a map and to see that data visualized was, for him, an aha moment. There's another image there with the gentleman with the handlebar mustache, sort of explaining, how can they accommodate more development. There was definitely an aha moment there where we said, look, you don't have to use every acre of open space. There's other ways to develop. Let's look at these different paints. Let's look at these different development styles and think about where else in a community you could accommodate that. And of course, the next conversation after that is the political wherewithal to help, both update the planning and the regulations to support that. But at least now there's a basis to that proposition that we can do things differently, and that's that aha moment.
Great. So we have another question here from Peter in King County, Washington. So he says, thanks for the great presentation work. And the question is, when would Charm Online beta be available or being released?
That's a great question. Look, we're going to be prototyping in 2023. We are working out scopes for contracting at this point. So the vision is for us to maintain project management and product vision here in program, and to work with a select few consulting teams to bring the firepower with UI, UX, and the technology stack. It's going to take time to kind of go through all of that, but we're hoping for a prototype, in the second half of 2023. We're going to test that with a handful of communities here in Texas. We would love to have interested candidate communities from other states as well to be able to test this. Our vision is to test early, to test often. We feel that's probably the best way that we can develop a product and build that incrementally.
Very nice. Well, if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. If not, then we might just, we got some people just saying great presentations and thanking you, Stephen, for taking the time. And we appreciate it. But if you do think of any questions, let us know. We'll send you info@usatexas.org. We'll send them on Stephen's way. Again, thank you all a lot for a great 2022. USA Texas is 10 years old. We just won chapter of the year, and it takes all of you all attending these speaker series and Mappy hours and all kinds of things to help make this a great and our chapter a success. So do we have anything else there, Matt? Attendance?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay,
If you would like to volunteer, there's a scan code right there. You can also go to the USA Texas webpage and fill out a quick little answer sheet there, and we'll get in contact with you if you would like to volunteer your time.
Yep, and as you can see, our website's been updated. We've rebranded ourselves with new logo, so it's been a great year. And so once again, I hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and hope everybody has a great holiday in December, and be safe. And Stephen, thanks so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it. I know you're really busy, and so we appreciate you taking the time.
No problem, Brian. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
And we'll be back in 2023 again. If you want to volunteer, by all means, get in contact with us. It is a great network of people, and we're doing some really nice things. Matt, I think I saw we had around 56 or so today in
Yes.
attendance, which it's not too bad after a Thanksgiving break, but it's a great presentation. So, but well, I guess, Matt, unless you have anything else.
I do not. No, I
Okay.
think that's it, Brian.
All right. Well, we will give you guys 6 minutes back of your day. And Stephen, again, thanks a bunch. And I'm sure we'll be talking and crossing paths sometimes in the future. All right.